One of the most common questions that the Jewish nation as a whole is dealing with right now is how do we deal with the rise in anti-Semitism? It is no secret that Jew hatred has grown exponentially, or at least its colors have been shown, since the heinous attacks on October 7th. Stories that we only heard of in the Holocaust, our generation are witnessing with our own two eyes. Families that have been annihilated, mamish completely killed. Things that we only heard of in 1940, 1942 are happening in our generation. When Jewish women are being raped, what happened to the Me Too movement? What happened to helping out women who get assaulted? Why is the whole world silent? CNN themselves, they had a whole episode about this, on how when it comes, and the anchor even suggested, he said, when it comes to Jewish women, the world is quiet. How do we deal with such a rise in anti-Semitism? What is the Torah's perspective? What is our view on what could we do as a nation to deal with the rise in anti-Semitism? That's what I would love to discuss with you in the next little bit. We're going to see a beautiful approach, and I think the way to answer it, the Gra says that whenever you want to understand something to its fullest, you have to see where it appears for the first time in the Torah. So the first Jew, the first fully born Jew, from inception till his death, is Yitzchak. So what I would like to do with you is look at the story of the first Jew and see how through his story we can get a better understanding of what anti-Semitism is, and also what we can do about the anti-Semitism that we're all witnessing wherever you are in the world. So let's begin with the story of Yitzchak. Fascinating, fascinating idea. I'll ask two questions. We'll answer those two questions, and then we'll see a beautiful, response of what we can do as Am Yisrael. So Yitzchak, out of all the Avos, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Yitzchak is the one that doesn't get a lot of prime time. Avram has two parshas, Yaakov has tons, Yitzchak gets basically one parsha, and even in the parsha itself, there's only one real aliyah, an aliyah and a half, where he's the one who's in action. What's the story of him in action? He leaves his country, he digs wells, he digs a few more, and then they steal it from him. They say, why? These are mine. That's the story with Yitzchak, is basically him digging the wells. That's where he gets his prime time. That's the story of Yitzchak. And I'd like to ask two fundamental questions on the whole story in Parshas Tolos, on the whole story of Yitzchak himself. First question I'd like to ask you is, Avram was the founder of monotheism. He brought the belief in one God to the world. Yaakov had his old trials and tribulation. He had the 12 Shvatim. We know what each one, he was the Ish Torah. We know what he gave to the Jewish people. What did Yitzchak do that made him one of the three patriarchs? Yitzchak, it seems like, what does he do? Not so much. And again, like we said, he doesn't get almost any prime time. To the contrary, there's a medrash that says that everything, whatever happened to Avram Avinu, happened to Yitzchak. And I'll give you a few examples. First of all, the medrash tells us that Yitzchak and Avram looked exactly the same. Avram holy this Yitzchak, they looked the same. People, when they saw Yitzchak, oh, yeah, that's Avram's son. Second of all, Avram had to leave his house. Yitzchak also had to leave his house. Avram left. There was a famine in his time. Yitzchak also had to leave because there was a famine in his time. When Avram Avinu left his house and he came down to Mitzrayim, what do you have to tell the king of Mitzrayim? What do you have to tell Paro? He said, my wife, she's not really my wife, she's my sister. We find the same thing with Yitzchak. He also, when he comes to Avimelech, he says, Rivka, she's not really my wife, she's my sister. Avram had a hard time conceiving. He didn't have a child till he was 100 years old. Yitzchak also, in the beginning of Parshas Tolos, he doesn't have any children. He's davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When Avram has two kids, one's a tzaddik, Yitzchak, and one's a Rasha, Yishmael. When Yitzchak has two kids, one's a tzaddik and one's a Rasha. He has Yaakov and he has Esav. It says in the parsha also that Yitzchak redug all the wells that Avram, his father, dug. So it seems very clearly from the story of Yitzchak that Yitzchak seems to be copying everything his father does. And if he's copying everything that his father does, what new did he bring to the table? What did he offer the Jewish people? Why did he become one of the patriarchs? The patriarchs are the people who set the tone for the Jewish people. What's so unique about Yitzchak that made him one of the three patriarchs? That's the first question. Second question I'd like to ask you is, from all of the Avos, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Yitzchak is the one who is the most connected to the Beis HaMikdash. He's most connected to Har HaMoriah, and I'll prove it to you. I'll give you at least 4 proofs that Yitzchak is the most connected to the Beis HaMikdash. Proof number 1, in this week's parsha, when he's digging the wells, so it says that he redug the wells that Avram Avinu dug. in Parshas Toldos. And then it tells us that he digs 3 more wells, and he names them 3 different names. And the Ramban and the Kli Yakar, they all explain that the 3 wells correspond to the 3 different Beis HaMikdash. The first Beis HaMikdash, the second Beis HaMikdash, and the third Beis HaMikdash. In other words, it's the story that's happening over here is kind of the story of Jewish history that's happening with Yitzchak. So you see that there's a deep connection right away between Yitzchak and between the Beis HaMikdash. Proof number 2, is that the Jewish people, when we were in Mitzrayim, so we left Yetzias Mitzrayim on Pesach, we got the Torah on Shavuos. 40 days later, we send in the Chet Egel, that was Shivasar B'Tammuz, and then for 40 days we asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu for tshuva. Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to Har Sinai again on Rosh Chodesh Elul, he comes back down on Yom Kippur, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Salachti kidvarecha. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands the Jewish people to build the Mishkan. We built it, says the Medrash, from Sukkot's time all the way until Hanukkah. Comes Hanukkah, that's when we're done building the Beis HaMikdash, the Mishkan. And we're ready, we want to build it. And the Medrash says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, wait, we're only going to erect the Mishkan on Nisan, in the month of Nisan. Why? So the Medrash explained, because Nisan is the month that Yitzchok Avinu was born. So obviously, there's some sort of connection between Yitzchak and the Mishkan. We're waiting a few months until the month of Nisan in order to erect the Mishkan on the date or on the month that Yitzchak was born. So that's proof number 2 that there's a strong connection. Where was Akedas Yitzchak? Proof number 3. Where was the Akedas Yitzchak? In Har Moriah. That's where the Beis HaMikdash is going to be. Proof number 4 is that it says in the Mishnah, Al Shlosha Dvarim Ha'olam Hamed. The world revolves around 3 things: Torah, Avoda, and Gemilas Chasadim. And we have 3 Avos. Avram Avinu is Gemilas Chasadim, he's the Issa Chesed. Yaakov is Ishtam Yoshev Olim, he's Keneged the Torah. And Yitzchak is Keneged Avoda. Avoda is what? The Beis HaMikdash. Avoda is Tefillah. And what does it say about the Beis HaMikdash? Ki beiti bet tefillah yikareh l'chol hamim. It's a place of going to daven. It's a place of getting close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Yitzchak represents the connection between the Jewish people, or between him and the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash. And the second question that I'd like to ask you is, what is this connection? What is this deep connection between Yitzchak and the Beis HaMikdash? So 2 very simple questions. Question number 1, as we mentioned, what does Yitzchak offer? What is he offering to the Jewish people? Why is he one of the patriarchs? And then question number 2 is, we see that there's a clear, strong connection between Yitzchak and the rest and the Beis HaMikdash. And the question I'd like to ask you is, why is Yitzchak it seems like he has the most connection. What's so unique about Yitzchak that he has the greatest connection to the Jewish people? We're going to answer these questions. And when we answer these questions, we're going to get a whole different perspective on anti-Semitism. We're going to get a whole different perspective on how we as the Jewish nation could deal with the anti-Semitism that's around us. But before we do that, I want to take you on a journey through the psukim, through the verses, and see that the life of Yitzchak is really the life of Jewish history, of the Jewish people throughout Jewish history. Yitzchak, as we mentioned before, is the first Jew. He's born a Jew. The first Jewish person to be born a Jew and die a Jew. His whole life, he's living as a Jew. So his life is going to foreshadow what the Jewish people go through and what the Jewish people have experienced. The way we're looking at it now is Jewish history, but the story of his life, what the Torah sheds light on his life, is going to be what the story of the Jewish people is throughout history. And let me walk you through this, and I'll do it with the psukim, with the psukim. So Yitzchak is the first Jew. He's born a Jew. But what happens? He has to leave his house. We're very familiar with the story. The Jewish people were here in the land of Israel, and we get thrown out. It says in the pasuk, "Vayeshev Yitzchak begerar." Gerar is milashon ger. He's a visitor. He's in a place where he doesn't belong. So what does the Jew do when we show up in a foreign country? What do? We try to lay low. We don't want to get involved in people's business. We don't want to make a lot of noise. We lay low, and that's what Yitzchak does. And not only that, Yitzchak feels threatened. When we go to a different country, what do we naturally feel? We naturally feel like we're threatened. So what does Yitzchak do? Because he feels that he's threatened, he tells his surroundings, by the way, my wife, Rivka, she's not really my wife, she's my sister. The Jewish people, we show up to a country and we feel so threatened that we need to say that, there's really my sister. We have to lay low because we know that people are looking into our lives. And his suspicion actually turned out to be true. What does the psukim say? It says that Yitzchak is in his house with Rivka, and Avimelech looks through his binoculars, looks into his house, and he sees that Yitzchak and Rivka are not really behaving like brothers and sisters. They're behaving more like husband and wife. And what does he tell Yitzchak? He says, why did you tell me she's my sister? Right? They're coming and accusing us for something that we had to do. Right? We had to tell the world we're trying to lay low. And Avimelech comes and he looks privately through your house, looking into your door, into your windows, saying, why are you behaving like that? Right? And then we said, tell them the truth. What do you mean, why do you behave like that? Look, proof in the pudding. We had to behave this way because all you're doing is looking at us. All you're doing is trying to accuse us. So then they play the innocent card. I didn't know. You should have told me. What does Avimelech say? Who knows, right? If you would have told us, we would have shown you more respect. So that's the first step in Jewish history. We come to land. It's not ours. We have to lay low. People are always looking at us. People are always accusing us. But then what happens to the Jew? Even when he's far in a foreign land, it says in the pasuk, "V'yigdal ish." The Jew rises. He's successful. We're the chosen nation. And he gets very, very powerful and very successful. He's matzliach. And what does he attribute his things to? He attributes it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But what happens to the Jews in that moment? What do the non-Jews do? They get jealous. They say, look at this Jew. Look how successful he is. What does it say? Vayikenu oto plishtim. The non-Jews are jealous. They say, here, look. Here comes a Jew. He's being matzliach. Why is he so good? And what do we say? Our success is directly linked to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everything that happened to me, I'm a smart businessman. No, HaKadosh Baruch Hu helped me out. That's what the Jewish people say throughout history. And we're growing and we become more successful. But this bothers them. This gets them very jealous. The non-Jews see the Jew being successful. What does it say? It says, V'chol ha'be'erot asher chafru avdei aviv b'imei Avraham satmu plishtim. All the wells that Avram Avinu dug, and that he dug, what do? They throw him out again. So again, Yitzchak comes to Gerar. He tries to lay low. And it doesn't work. And then he becomes very successful. And then they take the wells that he dug and his father dug, and they fill them up. In other words, because they're jealous, they fill them up. And what's happening to them when they're filling them up? If you remember, this is a time of famine. Why did Yitzchak come to Gerar in the first place? Because there was no food, there was no water. So Yitzchak is coming to a place where there's no water, and he actually finds wells. But what do they do to the well? They fill it up, meaning they're so jealous of the Jew that they're willing to hurt the Jew even if it's coming at their own expense. Right? Throughout history, when the Jewish people were hurt and kicked out and thrown out of countries, that country suffered the most. So again, this is part of the story of Jewish history. So they're so jealous, they fill up the wells, but that's not enough. What do they do afterwards? They throw him out. They kick the Jew out of the country that he's in. Lech mi'imanu, leave. You're too successful, whatever it is, leave the country. This is something that has happened throughout history many times. I actually looked down Wikipedia. I saw how many times throughout history have the Jewish people been thrown out of the country that they were in. And it's too long of a list to actually go through each one. So I took the last, 1,000 years, and I'll go through them very briefly. 1421 in Austria, 1290 in England, 1394 in France, in Hungary in 1349 and in 1360, Lithuania 1495, Milan 1597, Naples 1510, Nuremberg 1499, Portugal 1497, Sicily 1492, Spain 1492, Yemen 1679. Hundreds of times throughout our history, we've been thrown out. We've been thrown out of the country that we went to. So the Jew comes, he lays low, he's successful. The non-Jews see it, they throw us out. So we continue, we leave. What do? We go to another place. We'll try again. Let's settle another time. Let's see what we can do. So what does the Torah tell us? That Yitzchak continues, and he goes, and he digs a well. And he leaves Gerar, he goes to Nachal Gerar. He goes further away. I got thrown out, I'm leaving. So I'm going to dig again. He digs another well, and the non-Jews say, hey, that's not yours, that's mine. So Yitzchak says, what do you mean? I dug it, it's mine. So they start telling him, no, the water comes from it's really the water that's in the well is flowing from our city. So they take it away. They take it away from him. And what does he call it? He calls it Esek. Esek is a fight, is a dispute. They were fighting. And then he goes again a second time. He says, okay, let me dig a second well. So he goes a further place and he digs a second well and he finds water. And here again, the non-Jews come and they say, hey, you're taking our water, that's ours. What does he call it this time? He calls it Sitna. The second well is called Sitna. Sitna is from the Lashon of Satan, of hate. Yitzchak at this moment realizes that all the hate that happened to him up until this point is not attributed to anything. It's just they hate the Jew. There's nothing that the Jewish people can do about it. We were in the country. The country was successful because of us. We found water for the country. We got thrown out of the country. We found water again. We get thrown out again a second time and 2 times after we got thrown out again. The Jewish people are thrown out. So what does he do? It says that he goes and he continues and he digs the third well. And the third well he calls Rechovot. He calls it Rechov and he says, there was no fight about the third well. Ki ata hirchiv Hashem lanu ufarinu ba'aretz. Now HaKadosh Baruch Hu expanded our horizons and we were able to settle. And comes the Kli Yakar and the Ramban, and they say that the third well corresponds to the third Beis HaMikdash. In other words, let's try to wrap this up and understand. The story of Yitzchak's life is the story of the Jewish people throughout history, of us getting taken from place to place to place. And Yitzchak at some point realizes, there's nothing I can do about it. Sitna, they're just out to get me. What is the solution to anti-Semitism? How is it ever going to end? Says the Torah, Rechovot. When the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt, that's when anti-Semitism will end. Now this might be depressing for some people. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do to stop anti-Semitism. Really? I can't do anything? So to be honest, this gives me comfort. And the reason why it gives me comfort is because I know that the Jewish people are going to be here forever. We are not going anywhere until we get to Rechovot. So it might be a difficult time. It might be times are very hard and anti-Semitism is rearing its ugly head again. But we will never be defeated, period. And it's here. The Torah is telling us the story of the Jewish nation. And I want to share with you a story that happened to me last week. Last week, I went to an army base. And it's very popular now to make barbecues on army bases and help out the chayalim. We did that, but we did something else. There's a member in our community named Michael Stein, and he's a sofer. And he got up to the parsha of Ki tetzeh lemilchama al oivecha. If you go out to battle against your enemy. V'ra'ita am rav, you saw a nation and you're scared. It says, Al tira mihem. Don't be scared. Don't be, ki Hashem elokecha olech imach, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is standing with you. So Michael called me up and he says, come, let's go write a Sefer Torah on the border of Gaza, and we'll write these psukim. Each chayal will be able to take the pen, touch the pen, and write the parsha of Ki tetzeh lemilchama al oivecha. If you go out to war against your enemy, don't worry. Brilliant idea. We went down there, and he stood there for 5 hours. Hundreds of soldiers waited in line, religious, not religious, this type, a lefty, a righty, doesn't make a difference. We're all one nation, and each person is writing a letter. The soldiers afterwards, some of them were coming up to me. One guy said, I felt like my neshama was lit on fire. I had never had a feeling, and never in my mind did I imagine I could write a letter in the Sefer Torah. And at one point I took a step back, and I saw the line of soldiers waiting to write a letter, and thinking about the words that they're writing, and they're writing a Sefer Torah. And I thought to myself, could you think of a greater message, a more empowering message about the story of a Jewish people? Could you think of something that gives you more strength than what I'm witnessing right now? These are the soldiers who were on the border. They were in Gaza, some of them, a half an hour beforehand. And then they came out, they wrote a letter, they're going to be there for another hour, they go back in. The same fingers that were pulling the triggers to kill our enemies, the same fingers that were loading the bombs into the tank to shoot our enemies and to kill the enemies to ensure the future of the Jewish people are the same people that are now 5-10 minutes later taking a quill and writing a letter in a Sefer Torah. Could you think of a greater message of the story of the Jewish people? How far we've come and where we're going? The connection of Am Yisrael. That we have our Torah, we have our Masorah, we have the way of how we got the Torah and how we're able to now fight for it and defend it. This is the story of the Jewish people. So it gives me minucha to know at some level that we're going to be here forever. So anti-Semitism, it might continue, but we're not going anywhere. One of the most uplifting moments that happened, the head of the base that was there were thousands of soldiers that were there. The head of the base, he has all the different falafelim on his shoulder. He comes in and he wants to write a letter. And before he comes in, he says, I want to write the word Emor Alehem. Tell them, Shema Yisrael, listen, don't be scared. And he looks at us and he says, right now there's over 1,000 soldiers in Gaza. He says, I'm writing this word Alehem to give them the strength to be able to continue, to connect the past to the future. And he starts writing the Sofer with him, starts writing the word Alehem. And what do the people around him, what do we do? Naturally, everyone sprung up into a song. And what song did we sing? Am hanetzach lo mefached miderech aruka, which means what? Am hanetzach, the eternal nation, lo mefached, is not scared from derech aruka, from a long journey. If you're here forever, if you're not going, if you're infinite, if you're here for an infinite amount of time, so then there's no such thing as a long journey, because you're not going anywhere. Am hanetzach lo mefached miderech aruka. So the story of Yitzchak that we see, that we just explained, is the story of the Jewish people throughout history. Anti-Semitism isn't going anywhere. But now with this, we can really answer our question, or really re-ask them and then answer them. So why is the story of anti-Semitism, or the story of the Jewish people, told through Yitzchak? Right? Why did Yitzchak make the cut to be one of the avos? What is he offering? What did he give? And then number 3 is, what is the connection between Yitzchak and the Beis HaMikdash? So the answer to answer these questions, there's really one word that answers all these questions. What does Yitzchak give that the other avos didn't do? Why is Yitzchak the most connected to the Beis HaMikdash? One word, Mesorah, our rich tradition. What does Yitzchak do? What's something new that Yitzchak did that the other avos didn't do? You know what he did that's new? Nothing. He didn't do anything new. What did he do though? The way he got the Mesorah from his father, that's how he passed it on to the next generation. Yitzchak represents the Mesorah. Everything that his father did, he did. Like we mentioned, 7 different things that he did. The wells that his father dug, he redug as well. And the Zohar says that, what does it mean? All the people that Avram was Mekarev, after Avram passed away, they all left. And he had to re-bring them back. What Yitzchak represents is the rich Mesorah of Am Yisrael, is the tradition of the Jewish people. And that's why his story is the story that foretells or that foreshadows the story of Am Yisrael throughout Galus. How are we going to make it throughout Galus? How did we end up in the land of Israel 2,000 years after we got exiled? You know why? Because we had our tradition. We never left our Mesorah. Every year at the end of the Seder, what did Am Yisrael sing? Every Jew around the world, we said, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim habnuyah. So throughout our history, the way we made it through the Galus is through holding on to our tradition and not changing it in iota, making sure that we're true to our Mesorah, true to our values. The Torah is the biggest proof that we get to be here in Eretz Yisrael, that we get to have the land of Israel. So the story of Jewish history is told through Yitzchak, because Yitzchak is the one that enables us to survive through Jewish history. And how does he enable us to thrive through Jewish history? By teaching us this message of Mesorah. And if we hold on to the message of the Mesorah, and if we hold on to our tradition throughout all the years of exile, what are we finally going to reach? We'll reach Rehovot. We'll reach the Beis HaMikdash. So Yitzchak is the most connected to the Beit HaMikdash because his story and his message and what he offered to the Jewish people is what's going to guarantee for us the ability to return B'mira B'Aminu to the Beit HaMikdash through the Mesorah, through staying true to our tradition, through taking everything that, all the Mesorah and all the Torah that we have throughout history and bringing that on to the next generation. That is going to guarantee us to reach the Beis HaMikdash. So we asked, what did Yitzchak offer? What did he give the Jewish people? He gave the Jewish people Mesorah. He gave us the tradition that whatever the way you got the Mesorah from your parents, from your grandparents, that's how we need to give it on to the next generation. And if we do that, we'll be zocheh to the Beis HaMikdash, and that's why he's the most connected and the most linked to the Beis HaMikdash. How do we respond to anti-Semitism? What do we do in such a situation? We daven. We strengthen our Mesorah. We get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because the way anti-Semitism is going to end is not necessarily with rallies and not with protests. Again, Yitzchak, we have to do our ishtadlus. We have to do all that we could in our effort. Yitzchak was so determined. The Chafetz Chaim explains that Yitzchak, out of all the avos, what does he teach us? He never gives up. He gets thrown out of his city, he comes to Gerar. He digs wells, he gets thrown out. He digs another well, and he gets thrown out. Digs a second well, gets thrown out. Till the third one. He never gives up. So the Jewish people, we're never going to give up. We're never going to stop fighting. And we're always going to try to fight anti-Semitism the way when it hits us straight on. For sure we need to do that. But when is anti-Semitism going to end? It's going to end when Mashiach comes. And the moment we understand that, we should rechannel our focus. We should focus on the same time fighting anti-Semitism, but also focus on davening for the Beis HaMikdash, davening for Mashiach, davening for Yeshua, re-strengthening our Mesorah, re-strengthening our connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, doing more mitzvos, Torah, putting on talis and tefillin, doing all the mitzvahs that we need to do. Every single person knows exactly where he needs to be mechazik himself. And if Be'ezrat Hashem will do that, and we'll be able to strengthen our Mesorah and learn from the message of Yitzchak, of staying true to the Mesorah, that the way we got is to give it over to the next generation, then Be'ezrat Hashem will reach Rechovot. Rechovot means there's space, there's tranquility, there's peace. And the Ramban says, what does Rechovot represent? That represents the third Beis HaMikdash. So Be'ezrat Hashem, if we take this message and we really apply it to our day-to-day life and really strengthen ourselves, we'll be zocheh b'mira b'yameinu to see the end of anti-Semitism through the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu b'mira b'yameinu. Amen.